So welcome to another episode of Becoming an Ayn Rand Hero, where we use the ideas of Ayn Rand to live a life and a lifestyle that is heroic, that we can't wait to wake up to. And today I'm speaking with Jay Friedenberg, a longtime objectivist and author of a number of different books, the latest of which is Cognitive Science, An Introduction to the Study of Mind. Or actually, that's not your latest, is it?
Well, the third edition of that textbook just came out, so yeah, I mean, it comes close to being the latest.
Okay, great. And so Jay specializes in consciousness and futurism and technology. And so I wanted to talk with him about how Ayn Rand informs his thinking and guides him in terms of how we can approach the future that we're moving into, this exponential technology future that's going to be changing what it means perhaps to be human, but certainly how we live in the world and how we adjust to the amount of change that we're talking about. So thanks for having this conversation with me, Jay. I'm really looking forward to it.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Mark.
Okay, great. Your recent appearance at the Atlas Summit is where I got a chance to meet you and get more involved and associated with your ideas. I'm curious, how is it that you got involved with Ayn Rand, that you came across her? Kind of what's your origin story?
Well, you know, as the saying goes, it all started with the Fountainhead. And I think that was the case with me. I remember this was a while back, like probably early 1990s, and I was in graduate school, and I was sick. I remember I had the flu, and I couldn't go out. I felt awful, and I had this book that actually my father had recommended. He had a first edition of the Fountainhead published in, when was that? 1943, I think, and I just devoured that. I went through that, and it took me like maybe 2 or 3 days, to get through. And, after that, I felt better. So I sort of went through like this intensive, experience with that book. And it really, it was a very heroic, romantic vision of man and what can be, and what people can accomplish. And it inspired me to go on and to read Atlas Shrugged and all of her fiction and nonfiction works. And as a result, I then started attending what was then the Objectivist Society, and now then became the Institute for Objectivist Studies, and now is the Atlas Society. So it's gone through several incarnations. But I was one of the earliest members, I think, starting in 1992 or something. And I haven't gone to every single meeting, but I've been to most of them. So I'm an old timer.
Yeah, and so when you first got introduced, you went through Fountainhead in 2 or 3 days. That means you probably didn't do too much else.
No, I remember I was in this reclining chair in the bedroom. I just sort of reclined and pulled up the lamp and went through it. And she's such an engaging, clear writer that it just sort of drew me in. And I went through, I just went through this intensive experience and had an impact.
Yeah, I know when I read The Fountainhead, as I was looking at the various characters and how I related to them, I had different connections with different characters. I had to rethink my understanding of what it meant to be powerful and wealthy through Wynand, and I got a sense for what it means to be just focused on your work and just putting your vision of what's possible and your desire to really discover yourself and put yourself forward, to create yourself as you go through work. I'm curious, are there particular characters in the novels that have spoken to you personally and guided you? What's been your experience with that?
Actually, no, it's quite interesting. I'm working on a new project now, which is this scientific study of aesthetics. And the passage I've just finished working on today was about how people identify with characters in literature, and that one of the most primary, when you actually survey people and you ask them, like what were you thinking as you read this literary passage, and one of the most frequent responses is that people have an identification with the character, and they're focused on what the character, the similarities between the character and themselves, this identification.
Mm-hmm.
And I for me, it was Howard Rourke. I was not inspired to be an architect. I think being an architect is very cool, and I'm very interested in architecture, but my proclivities are not in that direction. But I definitely identified with him as a character in that novel and what he was going through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and would you say that influenced how you approached your career and the kind of work that you did, the projects that you took on?
Yeah, I'm a researcher. I'm a psychology professor at Manhattan College, and so I do research on vision, visual perception, and I wouldn't say that objectivism is what motivated me to do that specifically, but I almost have a sort of whole side career of doing objectivist-related stuff. So, at the Atlas Society meetings, I give talks on various objectivist-related topics, like, how objectivism connects to futurism and technology. I gave a presentation 3 years ago about the relationship between aphorisms, between philosophical sayings and objectivism. So, I sort of I have my main, I've got my sort of day job, but I do a fair amount of work, on objectivist type stuff on the side.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, so to branch into your work, especially in your work in terms of futurism and artificial intelligence, or as you put it, artificial psychology, right? What is the psychology of what it would mean to create an artificial person? Would that even be like? What interests you in futurism? How did you get into futurism? From
It's a good question. I think I'm cursed by being interested in too many things, and you can never, it's like I've sort of just given up and decided that I'm gonna just be moderately good at doing 20 different things rather than really, really good at doing one thing, which is what most people, do, right? Most people just have, their career and then their family, and that's it. For me, I have the time. I try to carve out additional time to work on these other projects. And yeah, I do. I teach a course on artificial psychology at the college, and this is a course that's sort of it's actually quite interesting because it's oriented around the question of whether or not we can construct an artificial person, whether we can sort of recreate all of the cognitive, emotional, and perceptual capabilities that we see in a human, and whether that can be done artificially, and then the sorts of questions that poses, ethically and morally, we are. The advances that are taking place right now in AI are, as you said earlier, are exponential, and we're getting to the point. In my view, almost every single capability. There's many capabilities that have been replicated now, and we're just on the road, I think, to having all of them done. And I just think it's almost a matter of time before every capacity, whether it's pattern recognition or creative thinking or artistic endeavors, that all these things that we previously thought were the sole domain of humanity, and these things that made us special are we're not going to be special that way anymore, because our mechanical progeny, our electronic offspring, I mean, they're going to be able to do all these things and then more. And then they're going to be able to go beyond and exceed those capabilities. And so I think this is something that people are going to have to get ready for, because I just see it. If you look at, you look at what's being done in these different disciplines, you see that that's what's happening.
Yeah, and it's interesting. One of the definitions of artificial intelligence, tongue in cheek, that I've heard is artificial intelligence is anything that humans can't not do, or once a computer learns how to do it, all of a sudden that's not intelligence. So there have been so many things that computers would never be able to do that, because that requires a certain kind of human creativity that only humans can do. And then computers, we figure out how to have computers do that. They go, well, yes, but not that. It's this other part. It's almost like the God of the gaps, where
exactly, yeah,
where there's this idea of, oh, well, this is what makes humans special, and computers can never do that. But there's nothing in theory that if the human being can do it, then the computer can do it. That's sort of how I think of it. Is that sort of how you approach it?
I think that's a good characterization. I mean, you look at, here's some recent examples in robotics. Folding laundry is still a very complex problem, because how do you determine where to grab? I mean, if you have a bunch of crumpled laundry on your bed, and how do you determine what's the difference between a T-shirt and a pair of shorts, or between a pair of underwear and some socks? They're all tangled up. I mean, that's a very complex pattern recognition task that we perform, and we do it, with relative ease. I now saw a video at the University of Southern California where they've got a robot system that can do that, starting to do that. It can actually reach out, grab an item of clothing, and it can fold it.
Kind of picks it up and looks at it from different angles so that it can figure out thing, and once it kind of maps out the shirt, then it just boom, and it can fold it.
Yeah, the system, I think, is sort of still under testing, and the video that I saw showed it able to successfully, segregate a target item from the background. So it was able to, grab a single piece, and then it recognized it as, for example, a shirt, and then it had a particular, procedure that it would implement for how to fold a shirt. And it was able to do that, and then reach in and grab another item, and that might have been something different, and then it would fold that. So it's doing it, and even more interesting was another reason about. I mean, these are all related to personal robotics, because the sort of industry where you can have these things come into your home and do the sorts of things that we don't want to do. And another similar task for that was cooking. And so they actually trained these two robotic arms that are mounted on a panel over an oven and stuff, and they were able to get it to cook, to make food. So it could recognize the pasta. It was able to lift up the pasta, put it in a pot of boiling water. It was able to chop cucumbers on a cutting board, and it could make a salad and a pasta dish. And I just saw this. I mean, and the thing was even able to toss a knife into the air and grab it back by its handle. So it did like a little loop trick with a knife.
Oh, really? I haven't seen that.
Yeah. So, I mean, you see that if you get it, I mean, you might want to just Google online or something, but take a look at, I mean, you see this stuff and it's like, wow, like the progress that we're making it's impressive.
It is amazing what's happening. And we're really just at the beginning of these processes. Right now, it takes a tremendous amount of computing power and very specialized engineering. Everything's sort of one-off. But as we figure out more and more of it, we're going to be able to get more mass production, and computers are getting more powerful. How do you see the process unfolding? Right? You could say there's the Kurzweil vision where we become more cyborgs, and so the humans use the machines to become more intelligent. And then there's the kind of the artificial superintelligence fears Nick Bostrom's work. And how do you see that unfolding? What's your understanding of that?
Well, that's a great question, and this is actually one of the themes, the topics that we address in my course. I mean, typically people tend to pose the future, technological future, as two what I consider to be like false alternatives. One is sort of like the Terminator scenario, where robots rise up against us, and destroy us, and because they have superior intelligence and capabilities, and can do that. I think that's highly unlikely. The second alternative is, and that's sometimes called hell. And then the second alternative is like, heaven, and that corresponds to the WALL-E. I don't know if you ever saw the animated movie WALL-E. Where you have all these fat, bloated, out-of-shape humans floating around on chairs, sipping frappuccinos, watching movies, where the robots attend to their every need. And I don't think that's likely outcome either. I think what you're going to see is an integration between the biological and the technological. So, I mean, we're seeing it right now. I mean, if you look at technology, it's getting smaller and smaller, and it's getting closer to the body. So we went from computers that took up entire rooms of buildings to desktops, to laptops, to handheld phones. Now we're at wearables like the Apple Watch. And so we're going to have, the next step is going to be like technology that's integrated into our clothing. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, the next logical step after that is going to be technology that's actually implemented in our bodies. And so, we're talking now about neural prosthetics that are being used to help crippled people move, that drive exoskeletons. And but even beyond that, things like nanobots, be able to sort of digest small molecular-sized machines that can regulate, for example, if you have diabetes, they might be able to regulate the amount of insulin in your bloodstream, and then produce, a controlled glucose release, so that they would never have to inject themselves, on a daily basis again. So I don't see that. I don't see that it's an us versus them, which is sort of the typical outcome. I think it's going to be a we. I think we're going to be them and they're going to be us. It's not going to be robots and humans. It's going to be sort of this, hybridized, melding of the two. But it's going to be voluntarily. It's going to be something that we want to do because there's going to be so many advantages in doing it. I mean, for example, like if you had if you didn't have to text, like if you got an iPhone, or the equivalent of an iPhone, like embedded in your brain, I think there are many people who would be willing to take the step to do that, even though there are risks involved, because the benefits are so tremendous, right? You just have to you initiate and control these things through thought alone. And, the brave people are going to adopt these things, and then, hopefully they won't be outlawed or banned. And, and then we'll work out the problems. It's not that there aren't going to be problems. Mm-hmm. And like with any technology, and then hopefully, move off into a future where, the human capabilities are vastly enhanced.
Mm-hmm. Okay, couple different directions to go here. To bring it back to objectivism, and what are the implications of this expanded understanding of self, or the expanded capabilities of self, and the shift in how we understand human limitations, and how that fits in with our sense of ethics and how we relate to other people? How do you see the moral implications and the implications for reason from this kind of development?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Another excellent question. I from an objectivist and a libertarian standpoint, and I consider myself to be both of those, I
you
think that,
rebel.
I think it has to be reason-based, right? I mean, I think we have to make these decisions rationally and using objectivist values like, productivity and achievement and so forth. I mean, why would we want to do these things? So we could be more productive and so we can achieve better things, right? I mean, that's a very Randian view. You have this future in which human capabilities are improved. And we're not going to use these technologies to make us less rational, right? I mean, ideally, would implement them in a way in which they're going to enhance our own rationality, right? They're going to make us more intelligent, less fallible, less subject to making mistakes in the way we think about things. For example, computers are so good at logic and math. Well, if you can integrate those kinds of capacities into a human being, that's going to make us, more intelligent and perhaps better able to make decisions. I mean, I think, though, at the same time, that you're increasing rationality, you want to do it in an ethical way, right? So you're not doing, you're doing these things, you're implementing these kind of capabilities in a way in which you're not going to initiate force against others, right? So you want to make sure that, there are laws. I mean, these are going to be new things. So you're going to have a whole host of new laws that come into place that in a free system that sort of govern the way people are going to interact using these things. So, we have to think ethically about it. We have to think ethically about it. And I think on the libertarian side, these things have to take place in a free market and in a free, democratic society. So the decision to do these things shouldn't be determined top down by government forces. They should be, these decisions need to be made by individuals. So, for example, if I decide that I want to enhance myself and become super intelligent, then the government should not be standing in my way. And obviously, there's many people who would want to restrict that sort of thing because they're going to say, oh, well, this is going to create a category of uber human beings who are going to be, who are going to rule over everybody else. But I strongly disagree with that argument because if you look at the history of new technologies and the way that they get implemented, there are some inequalities at first. For example, prices are high and so the rich people can afford to do them. But if it's taking place in a market and you're having competition, eventually those prices come down. You have additional, other manufacturers that come in and produce these sorts of things. I mean, look, even the poorest person in America can afford a smartphone, right?
Yeah.
I mean, not everybody can have a Mac or an iPhone or an iPad, but there are alternatives. There's Samsung, there's other things that. So this notion of the digital divide, I think, is very misguided, and I think it's sort of taking this old argument of classism and differences and stuff, and then sort of giving it a new technological spin. But it's actually no different than any other issue politically, and that is that you have to allow these things to be decisions that are made by individuals. If I want to enhance myself or I want to genetically modify, my offspring and enhance their capabilities, this has to take place on an individual level. It can't be imposed by government. Otherwise, we're going to end up in a situation like 1984, an Orwellian kind of thing. So anyway, that's my take on it.
Yeah, excellent. And it's interesting because the technology is getting distributed to the masses much faster. Right? Cars took decades, but even you could say the cheapest, least powerful smartphone of today is still much better than the iPhone was when it came out, and that was only 10 years ago.
Right.
And so as the technology increases, yes, it will be expensive, but the distribution to the wider population happens faster. Now that's not necessarily an ethical argument, in the sense of if I want to relate with someone, if I want to alter my biochemistry, if I want to enhance my brain, that's a personal decision, right? From an ethical perspective. But it's also, there's a social benefit effect that happens. Imagine if we had made computers illegal in the 60s because, some people are able to use computers and that gives them an unfair advantage. Then we wouldn't get all of the benefits of it. But it does raise the question of competitive advantage, right? That some people are going to be able to enhance themselves, and that's going to give them an advantage over others. I can imagine in your academic setting, you're having this class, that a lot of these arguments get played out. What is you could say, the social culture? What are the types of arguments that you deal with, and how do you foresee the conversation evolving around that issue?
I mean, there are inequalities right now. I mean, look, people are different. People are already incredibly different from one another, right? I mean, I have certain skills, and I have others where I'm, lacking. And I mean, well, what do? Well, you don't, just because someone's smarter than you don't restrict them and prevent them from becoming more intelligent or getting a better education. We wouldn't do that now in a system where we have, currently have no technological enhancement in that area.
Right.
And so I think the argument is the same.
That's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I mean, these technologies there's going to be inequalities. There's always inequalities, but eventually in a market system, they equilibrate and these things balance out. First of all, you can't restrict them. I think you have to make them available to everyone. And there's a little bit of a leap of faith that's required. It's like, I mean, just like it's illegal to kill someone right now or to steal. I mean, it might be illegal to download somebody's, neural database or something from their neural interface. I mean, there's going to be, there's no question that these are going to be strange and interesting times, but I think we have to approach them the same way America has approached these issues in the past, which is that, look, these are individual decisions. People have individual rights. You have to allow them. You have to assume that people are intelligent and that they're, and that they are acting in their own best, self-interest. And yes, I mean, I even read an interesting article about war bots. I mean, how right now the military is using robots basically not to kill other people, but more for things like reconnaissance and transporting supplies and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
But there's this article, I think it was in Singularity University newsletter, and I think they had said something like, well, we shouldn't restrict war bots because, number one, they're going to be out there instead of soldiers, and so if one of those things gets blown up, at least it's not a soldier who died, right?
Right.
So they're like soldier surrogates. They're going to be fighting for us, and it's going to be like any other military technology, like airplanes or tanks. I mean, there's going to be all countries competing, developing these things. You can't restrict it. What are you going to do? Impose a worldwide ban on these things? It's not doable because we're talking about every nation all over the world. So you have to allow these things to go forward. I mean, there's going to be competitive development, and there's certainly risks involved. I mean, I can certainly foresee some scenario 20 years in the future with one of these war bots gets hacked and gets controlled remotely by some terrorist or something, and goes into a village and kills 100 people. I mean, I think things like this are going to happen, but you can't let the risks outweigh the benefit. I think ultimately the benefits of implementing these technologies are going to outweigh the risks. And if you're terrified of these things, and all you want to do is control everything and prevent them from going forward, then what you're doing is you're putting a harness on civilization. I mean, it's what you're doing is you're putting shackles on humanity and preventing human human capabilities from, rising to greater heights. And I think that's like one of the worst possible things we can do. I think ultimately that's like a worse outcome than any Hollywood movie.
Yeah, it would be both tragic and so sad to have this possibility of what we can become. If there's anything that human beings bring, it's this capacity to transcend ourselves, to recognize we give when we're born. When we just have our physical bodies, we're not very powerful. But we can learn. We can use our rational mind to make sense of things and build tools, and then build tools that manage tools and coordinate with ever greater levels. And we just create more and more beauty and power. And to stop that, it seems to go against the very purpose of purpose. That we are creative individuals. We're creative as a species collectively, and each person adding their strand to this process it's the beautiful part of life. I keep coming back to beauty because it's the creativity that makes that possible. You're studying. You're working on a book on aesthetics now. Is that what you said?
Yes. Yeah. On the psychology of aesthetics and art.
Mm-hmm. How do you foresee the computers and this kind of computational power enhancing our ability to create art, to leverage our rationality into what's possible? I'm curious if that's part of the work that you're doing.
Well, it's definitely possible, and it's happening. I mean, look at right now. Like musicians now have synthesizers, right? And you can simulate any instrument using a keyboard synthesizer. So, and then you have software that allows you to compose music in much more powerful ways than were ever possible, like even 20 years ago.
Yeah.
I have a friend, actually, he's an objectivist friend, and that's what he does. He has this system. He's a musician. He has this system, and and he can crank out like better songs, more songs than he ever was capable of doing before. And he's doing that because technology is a new tool. I mean, it's an instrument that allows you to express your creativity in a more efficient way and in better ways. I mean, look at what the internet has done for music distribution. It took the power away from big musical companies that had like a lockdown on what they considered was popular and acceptable. And now any musician can compose his own, not any musician, but it's possible to compose your own work, put it up on your website, have people listen to it, generate success that way, sell, and then market it and sell it online. I mean, wow. I mean, that's only a good thing, and so I see these technological tools as ways of amplifying our own human powers and amplifying our own creative abilities, our own intelligence. And music is just one example. I mean, you could provide multiple examples in the visual arts as well. And interesting also in terms of the topic of this book, I mean, science now is studying these things, right? Like, so you can now use computers, things like eye trackers. You can present like a painting, I don't know, let's say you present the Mona Lisa to somebody in the lab, and then you can see where they fixate and saccade, where they move their eye movements.
Right.
Do they look at the eyes? Do they look at the nose? Like, what parts of paintings do people focus and pay attention to? So, on the artistic side, they allow us they amplify our powers, but they're also allowing us to understand the whole artistic and creative process better through the scientific study of art and beauty.
Yes, I've been curious what's going to happen once we can improve our fMRIs, our ability to do brain scanning, whether it's fMRI or EEG. They're going to be able to present us with art and actually see how our brain is understanding it and morph the art in order to have our brain have more intense experiences. And it's going to create whole new realms of not only artistry, but the experience of art.
Yeah. I mean, there's been a lot of neuroimaging work being done now in the arts. There's a guy at the University of Pennsylvania, Anjan Chatterjee, who's done some work in this area. And it's interesting, you look at the pleasure center of the brain, the neurons that respond to dopamine. So these are the parts of the brain that light up when you have sex or eat chocolate or, and when you're happy and stuff. And those areas also become active when you're experiencing art, when you're listening to music or watching a movie, an inspiring movie. So we're understanding how the brain, sort of information processing models of what the brain is doing from cognitive neuroscience when you are, either producing art or experiencing art. And this is a whole new area now. It's called empirical aesthetics. There's several journals that are devoted to it. There's a international conference that meets every 2 years. I just got back from that in Vienna a couple weeks ago. So it's exciting. It's very exciting because we're going to understand why we respond to art.
Which will completely change the kind of art that we create.
You can tailor the art. Like, there are some researchers in the UK who they actually came up with an algorithm to predict what songs would be popular, like how popular they would be, based on certain properties like rhythm and tempo and melodic variation and so forth. And this thing is great. You can actually upload a song. So you could take your favorite song, you can upload it to their site, and it will give you a ranking in terms of how popular it would be. And then so that's what they did. They did this for a variety of songs, and they were able to sort of tweak the algorithm and get it to be pretty good at predicting. So you can tailor. I mean, what you can do in the future now is tailor art to not only for the masses but also for very specific tastes. So if your Netflix makes recommendations about what movies that you might like, or Pandora will also make suggestions based on your listening history. And so we already have algorithms now that are able to sort of identify your specific tastes and then be able to, recommend artists that fit that taste. And this is a trend. Actually, Michio Kaku makes this prediction in one of his books, where he says that's going to be one aspect of the future, is that you're going to be able to tailor specific tastes to individuals. Like, we'll be able to understand all the, our own sort of individual idiosyncrasies and, come up with the perfect song for you or the perfect movie for you. And that's going to be very cool, right? I mean, that would be that.
And as is predictable, the perfect commercial for you. The perfect advertisement. It will. I think it's going to require the faster the world moves, the more it requires of the individual human to recognize what is it that I truly value. Not what has my culture taught me to value, not what does the group around me teach me that I should want, but what is it that I care about? And one of the things I value so much about Ayn Rand is really using your mind to clarify what's truly valuable for you, what's in your rational self-interest, rather than just what does your culture provide for you, such that you just automatically respond to it. Do you have any thoughts on how as we become more rational, that will affect our art, our business, in that down that realm?
Well, I'm hoping, right? I mean, objectivism is a philosophy that's based on the rational individual, and if we can use machines to become more rational, then ipso facto we would become more objectivist, right? I mean, because I mean, objectivism is a philosophy based on reason, and it uses reason to determine what are proper values. So if we become more rational, then we ought to consider those values to be more important and pursue them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, you know, if you look at things like productivity, so what is it? Well, I mean, I forget her list, but there's like rationality, productivity, freedom, achievement,
integrity, honesty.
Right. All of these things. I mean, if objectivism is right, and it is a rational philosophy because it's used. You know, Ayn Rand was an extremely rational individual, and these were the conclusions that she came to. Right. So, you know, we would expect that if we could use technology to make ourselves more rational, then we would become more objective. Actually, it's a quite encouraging thing. I mean, to think if that were possible.
Yes.
I mean, you know, like getting the right values. You know, the values are so important. I mean, to me, going forward in the future, like the two things that are most important is that you, that you're rational, but also that you are ethical and that you have the right value system as part of that ethics. Because it's not enough to be super intelligent or to be, you know, like a god and omniscient. You have to use that intelligence in an intelligent way. You have to use it in a proper value-based way. So yes, I mean, it is a little scary that if you have super intelligence harnessed towards evil ends, you know, like who was it? Someone told me that Hitler was pretty intelligent. I mean, right? He was able to manipulate people, but he used his intelligence for evil, you know, for bad purposes. So I do think we do have to be on the lookout for superintelligence, because if it's not coupled with a proper value system, then there could be some serious repercussions.
Right.
So I think we need to do research on how intelligence can enhance values, you know, and how we use intelligence to determine new values that Rand didn't think about.
Yeah.
And I think that stuff is just as important as intelligence. If you have intelligence that's not coupled with an ethical system, you could have some serious problems.
Right. And it begs the question, in a sense. I think what you're speaking to speaks to the heart of the idea of artificial intelligence, because intelligence has two major branches to it, you could say. Intelligent means being smart, right? Making good choices that actually get you what you really want. That's what intelligence is. And in that sense, to be rational must be based in values, because the whole purpose of thinking is in order to realize your values. And so if you're going to be truly rational, you must apply your mind to ask the question, what is truly valuable? And the smarter you get, the more you recognize what's valuable, and therefore the smarter the choices that you make. You become more intelligent in that sense.
Right.
And you could say the other part of intelligence is just the raw capacity to process data. It's to you could say use logic regardless of the premises and regardless of the ends. And we can program a computer to pursue very dangerous and destructive ends, right? You could say Hitler used whatever intelligence and social skills he had to band together people who were doing very evil and bad things. Was it his rationality that led him to choose the bad things, or was it his irrationality, his lack of intelligence about which values to pursue? And
exactly.
And you could say, as I understand the artificial intelligence debate, or the conundrum of it in terms of can computers be intelligent, it's that distinction. Can computers recognize what's valuable? And not just can they process information and can they solve problems, but can they solve the right problems? And once they solve those problems, can they then create even more important questions, more problems to solve, which are about, again, better values. And that begs the question, better for whom? As Ayn Rand would say, to whom? Values presuppose to whom and for what?
Right.
And
right.
Yeah, I'll let you talk.
Yeah, exactly. Let's hypothetical scenario. We create a super intelligent human through whatever means. Let's say, nanotechnology, neural implants, whatever it happens to be. And that person has enhanced abilities. So that might open up, and that person's now capable of doing new things. Here's the other side of it also, is that if you can use genetic engineering to create people who can breathe underwater, or who can run like 3 times faster, who can, we're going to be enhancing not only our mental abilities, but our physical abilities through these new technologies. And that opens up whole new arenas of like, what sort of legal system do you now put in place for these new kinds of beings? And then you have, so those are like maybe sort of extensions of humans and what humans are going to become. But what if you have a robot with an AI program in it, and this is an artificial person. So this system in every way is indistinguishable from a real person. Whatever test you give it, its behavior and its responses would be indistinguishable from humans. So I'm not just talking, the Turing test, which is simply based on linguistic capability, but I'm talking like the Turing test generalized to all human capabilities.
Right. You could ask it questions about poetry and values, and it would come up with answers which are the kind of answers that human beings would come up with, because it speaks to the kind of values that human beings respond to further your point.
Yeah. So the future is going to create new beings, whether it's an artificial person, whether it's a cyborg or a hybrid human, and these creatures are going to have new capabilities, and so you're going to have a potentially new set of ethics and a new legal system in a society to sort of govern their behavior and interactions with others. This AP, as artificial person, as I call it, if it's indistinguishable from a real person, you have to give it rights, right? Mm-hmm. So if it murders this is sort of a lot of what you see in Isaac Asimov novels, but if this thing commits a murder, then you can consider it guilty for having committed that act, and then that entity would need to be punished, right? Mm-hmm. So, it's interesting. We could have a new class of human. We could have entirely new beings, and then their abilities even go beyond human capabilities. And then, So you cannot, in all of these arguments, you cannot ignore values. You cannot ignore ethics and law. These things are going to go along. They're along for the ride. You cannot divorce, these technological advancements from ethics. Mm-hmm. It's not, it's not possible.
And I will say we don't want to. This is the use of rational and higher intelligence. Higher intelligence is going to be about our values, because it's the values that determine what we care about. It's what we value, and as we become more intelligent, we want to use that intelligence to clarify our ethics. And that raises a question in the artificial superintelligence, the AI, the ASI community and the ASI debate. There's an aspect about the motivation strategy, right? What are the values that you're going to feed into or program into the artificial superintelligence such that it values human beings? And in order to do that, I'm of the opinion that value system, and the value system that we ought to be working on for artificial superintelligence, is a variation of the objectivist value system, where we recognize rationality in terms of ethics, that we figure out what is the to whom, what is the human self, what is that which makes humanity human? What's valuable about humans? How do we codify that using rational self-interest? And how do we build a society that honors the self-interest of the rational agents, which will include artificial intelligence?
Yeah, I see two. I mean, I see like a two-tier system. One is the existing libertarian objectivist value system, where you allow individual choice, you stress rationality and freedom, and that stuff's going to apply to artificial people. It's going to apply to super intelligent agents. So I don't see those values, the values changing. Those fundamental values are going to be in place, but then there's going to be new agents, new entities with new capabilities, and you're going to need a new ethical system, one that will not retroactively invalidate anything that Rand said. It's just going to be like additive. It's going to be
a refinement.
It will refine in some cases, but I think we're just going to be a whole new territory. I think we might have a whole new ethical system. I mean, imagine, we might just allocate lawmaking to like super intelligence, because if you can anticipate, you look at legal books, they're so filled with all these rules, like, if you get into an accident, who's responsible, what were the conditions, and, you could have super intelligent agents that would instantly be able to like elaborate and anticipate all possible, problems that could arise, let's say in, autonomous driving, and like who would be culpable and who wouldn't. I mean, there's this concept of logical omniscience, that once you feed a computer sufficient information, it can use logical inference and other means, maybe like data mining, to come up with a complete set of laws, a complete understanding of laws for a given domain, like driving or I don't know, any other area that you might get. So it's interesting. Just like Newtonian physics just like Einsteinian physics didn't invalidate Newtonian physics, right? It just sort of
it understood it as a special case of a larger problem.
Right. So F equals ma was still gravitation, all that stuff that didn't discover wasn't wrong anymore, but it was just considered in a larger context in which we understand more. And I think that's the same thing that's going to happen going forward with ethics and with values, that we shouldn't, we're not going to discard the good stuff that works, right? But there's going to be a whole bunch of new and interesting things that we might never even be able to anticipate.
There are distinctions that we haven't made, and therefore we can't judge one of those distinctions as better than the other because we haven't made it yet.
Yes. As a futurist, I like to try to predict the future, but you can only do it best in the near term. I mean, there's certain, this is actually the topic of my talk at the Atlas Society in Las Vegas in July. Was one portion, one of the topics was just this, that how do you deal with those sorts of issues?
Yeah, and Arthur C. Clarke is famous for saying that any technology sufficiently advanced will be indistinguishable from magic.
Right.
And I like to think that any intelligence sufficiently advanced will be indistinguishable from omniscience. Right? Right. Even if the computer is not actually omniscient, if you're several orders of magnitude greater precision than what we have right now, it's the functional equivalence of omniscience from our perspective. And if we can use that intelligence to examine the ethical, moral issues and bring all of that intelligence to bear, there's some great things. There's some great things in front of us. I don't know if you've ever met Michael Vassar. I was talking with him once, and he suggested he suggested that the more intelligent we become, the less assholes we will become. Right?
Well. But again, being a quote unquote asshole is being unethical, right? So it's like,
yes, exactly.
You got to use the intelligence to determine what is a proper ethical system. You can't just have the two things be independent of each other.
Yes.
And
it's my hope that the objectivist framework, the fundamental idea of rationality dealing with reality, taking responsibility, using rational self-interest, and treating other rational agents with respect, so that we can work towards increasing beauty and realization, that to the degree that we can bring objectivism into the artificial intelligence movement, it's only going to be good for humanity and the extensions or expansions or transcension of humanity that we're in the process of building.
Right. And, not everybody might decide to upgrade, right? Just like we have a society now and you have a spectrum of different types of abilities, but people, interact with one another. If you don't want to upgrade, that's your choice. And so there are going to be some people of quote-unquote lesser intelligence who are, I don't want to say they're going to be left behind, but you're not going to, the super intelligent beings aren't going to, wipe those people out. They're going to allow them to coexist. So, if a free society that is tolerant of others and that respects others, irregardless of their capabilities, right?
Right.
I'm not going to get angry at somebody because they're less intelligent, or hate someone because they can run faster than I can, or are better at math than I am. If someone is better than me at something, I'm not jealous of them. I have respect and admiration for them. I want to be like that,
Mm-hmm.
And so, there's going to be, I think the future is going to be, if it's left up to individual choice, you're going to have a society with a broad spectrum of capabilities, ranging from the super intelligent to the kinds of people we have right now who have no upgrades. And you cannot force people to do these things, right? If someone thinks it's an abomination, they don't like technology, they don't want to do it, fine, don't do it. But just don't force somebody else to not do it, right? They don't have a right to prevent me from upgrading if I want to. Just like when I'm upgraded, I don't have the right to do anything to someone who might be of quote-unquote lesser intelligence. So the whole system is going to be similar to the way it is now, in that you must have toleration and respect for others, irregardless of their capabilities, and you don't initiate force. The sort of prime libertarian directive, which is that you never initiate force against other people, or that you don't violate other people's rights. One of the things I think that we've left out of this discussion a little bit is just the whole concept of rights. And,
Mm-hmm.
Every person is going to have rights, and you have to respect those. You have to determine what they are for these new class of beings. But then everybody, regardless of their level, is going to have rights, and those rights need to be respected. So, the only people who are going to quote unquote be left behind are going to be the ones who want to be left behind, and that's fine. That's totally fine. That's a choice that they have made, and nobody should force anything on them. Just like the religious right and the people who think technology is horrible and they want to ban it and restrict it, just like those people should not prevent others from going forward. So it sort of works in both directions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the more intelligent we become, the more we can recognize that. And I've got to assume that any intelligence that builds ethics in, right, that we build in a motivation strategy that has a fundamental use of rationality to determine what actually makes human beings happy, what is right and good for human beings, is going to have room for all kinds of humanity. It is in that sense, you could say, a libertarian utopia, again, with any society sufficiently advanced will be indistinguishable from a libertarian utopia.
Yes,
Yeah.
that is civilization. That is an advanced civilization is one which is free, which respects individuality, which abhors violence, which follows all of these, objectivist libertarian principles. I mean, we have to preserve these things going forward. But all the new stuff that comes out is going to be, interesting to see too. So.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I'll offer one more idea. I like to talk about what I call the bureaucratic singularity, and this is one of the you could say hopeful ideas I talk about, which is that I suggest that government grows arithmetically, whereas technology grows exponentially, and there's a point in that curve where technology is advancing faster than government can regulate it. And I call
That's
that
a wonderful idea. I love that. Yeah.
I call that the point of the bureaucratic singularity, and I think that we're actually at that point where the Bitcoin and blockchain, Uber, Airbnb, and peer-to-peer networks that we're reaching a point where individual creativity and the benefits that come from greater productivity, greater capacity to coordinate with others, greater ability to find people with whom you agree and who can create value for mass numbers of people, and the adoption rates are going to be fundamentally changing the way that government works and the freedom of individuals. I'm hoping that you find that attractive in some way. How do you foresee the government bureaucracy, individual technology? How do you see that unfolding?
Yeah. Again, Thomas Jefferson and the founding fathers said, even then they were so brilliant. Even then they understood that I'm probably going to get the quote by Jefferson wrong, but he said something like the tendency is for government to grow and for liberty to yield. That hasn't changed, and I think technology is on both sides. I think technology benefits, can be used by governments, but I think technology can also be used by individuals and corporations. So if government is getting more powerful and it's leveraging technologies to make itself more powerful in bad ways, then that's something we have to look out for, right? So, government drones like spying on people, things of that nature, we have to be careful for. But on the flip side, you could say, well, human, citizens can use drones to spy on the government, right? So you could have drones spying on drones, and then you could uncover the sort of nasty things that the government is up to. And so I think you need to have, a balance. Technology is going to be used by everyone. It's going to be used by the citizenry, and it's going to be used by, the government institutions. And again, the question is how those things get utilized. So they leverage capabilities. So if government's going to act evil, and then it's using technology, then that technology is going to leverage its evil, and that is going to be a horrible thing. But hopefully that will be counterbalanced by the use of technology, by individuals, companies, families, and all kinds of other social organizations that will serve sort of as a counterbalance to sort of be a check on the growth of government power.
Yeah, the latest release of emails, right, that seems to be happening more and more frequently, is going to cause a transparency in government that I think they're completely unprepared for. And my hope is that Toto is going to pull back the curtain, and we're going to see the wizard of government power for what it is. But I've always been an optimist.
Yeah. No, I think they talk about hacktivism, but I think, people like these libertarians that go out there, and I mean, I think there's definitely a good side to exposing government and the sort of bad things it does. But, by the same token, sometimes if you're exposing like government and espionage related items, that can actually cause the death of people. So, if you're releasing military secrets that actually, or intelligence data that, compromise spies in the field or ongoing military operations, then, I'm not so sure that's a great thing either. So I think these hacktivists and these people that are, or just government agencies that are hacking each other, I mean, I think that there's, it sounds weird, but I think there's just sort of like responsible hacking and irresponsible hacking. And, I think the information, once you do the hack and you have the data, like you have to decide what you do with it. And, I mean, I think you need to think deeply about what information you should release and which you shouldn't. If it's government corruption, if it's some politician taking money from some corporate entity, get that stuff out there for sure. Mm-hmm. But I think you have to. I don't think we should just get through it all out there. I think that you have to think about what the possible repercussions are.
Yeah, I agree. Again, the more intelligence, let's hope we use that intelligence to increase our ethical responsibility. And the more we do that, the more we have the capacity for that. I think we're in for some radically interesting times.
For sure. Definitely.
Okay. Well, so we've covered a lot of ground. Is there anything that is particularly interesting to you in terms of what's happening with objectivism and how artificial intelligence is being accepted by objectivism, or objectivism with artificial intelligence, or anything else that you want to add before we close?
Well, Mark, I could talk about this. I could talk about this stuff forever. So,
right.
But I will just say one last thing. Ed Hudgens, who's at the Atlas Society, is starting a new program in which he's trying to sort of make connections between people in Silicon Valley and tech entrepreneurs and objectivism. So he's sort of reaching out to people in the technology community and trying to say, here, this is a philosophy that is,
custom made for this.
Yeah, absolutely. And these people are already like that to begin with. I mean, it's, people that are interested in technology, I think, tend to be more rational than the average person. And so they're going to look at Rand's ideas, and I think they're going to be pretty accepting of them. So I really would like to see that program go forward. I'm involved in it in a very minor way. But I think if we can connect like Elon Musk and all these other entrepreneurs with objectivist ideals, that's going to just, improve the sorts of things that they do and, make for a better future world.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Objectivism as a central motivation strategy for artificial special intelligence, superintelligence, please. I'm looking forward to interviewing Ed on here as well. I really appreciate what you're doing, what Ed's doing, what Luis is doing, and I'm about to your episode will be following an episode with Robert Trzynski, and there's a lot of really great people who are looking to bridge this divide or this opportunity from objectivism to artificial intelligence, and I'm proud in advance of the contribution that objectivism will be making to the ethical development of artificial intelligence.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, along with organizations like Nick Bostrom's, what is that? The Institute for Existential Risk.
Right.
And Wendell Wallach, who is with Yale, and now he's, I think, doing some sort of, he's working on a new book project, but he's also another person who's looked at sort of how ethics should be applied towards emerging technologies. So I think objectivists and libertarians need outreach to these other organizations, and that's only going to be, benefit both sides. A lot of objectivists and libertarians don't know about these organizations, and vice versa. So what we have to do is sort of build awareness, just to start things off. So.
Yeah, and fortunately, artificial intelligence attracts some of the smartest people in the world, and so to the degree that we can get the objectivist message into that system, it only makes sense for them to take up the best parts of it and to leverage it into the next level of ethics that's going to be required for these future intelligences. All right. Well, so Jay, absolute pleasure. Thanks for the conversation. Keep up the good work, and I'm glad to get to know you, to have you on my team, and to be on your team in service of creating a future to which we all want to belong.
Well, I very much enjoyed the conversation, and I look forward to our continued collaboration. So let's be in touch after all of this.
Excellent. Let's have this be a beginning, not an ending.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
The Becoming an Ayn Rand Hero podcast is sponsored by the composer Darren John Lewis, whose music I use for this podcast. If you'd like a custom choral or symphonic piece for your special event or celebration, or if you'd just like to hear more of his music, go to darrenjohnlewis.com. That's DARINJOHNLEWIS.com. Thank you, and see you in the next episode of Becoming an Ayn Rand Hero.